I'm going to start this video by simply stating what I know about the game to the best of my abilities, so that when I get to my opinion, everything else will be easy to understand. It's not that I hesitate to give my own opinion, because you can count on me to stand my ground even if my stance is not the popular view. Rather, I want you, the viewer, to get a chance to develop your own opinions before listening to mine. Cool? Frosty. So, Remnant from the Ashes is a third-person shooter, despite this person proselytizing otherwise. You play from a third-person perspective, you fire guns at enemies, hence third-person shooter. That being said, the game borrows substantially from Dark Souls games, again despite this person proselytizing otherwise. Remnant has fog gates, like Dark Souls. It has dragon hearts that work like Estus flasks in Dark Souls. Remnant has weight mechanics that influence the roll, just like in Dark Souls. If you rest on a checkpoint, you replenish your health, dragon hearts, and ammo, just like how bonfires work in Dark Souls. You can also fast travel between different checkpoints, just like the bonfires in Dark Souls. The difference, you see, is that while Dark Souls has a set world with set enemy placements that you can memorize and eventually master, Remnant has your world randomly generated so that your experience with your own local campaign will be different compared to when you play co-op by joining other people's games. When you complete games in other people's worlds, your progress in your own world stays the same. You will get to keep the items and traits that you found in other worlds and bring them to your own adventure. If you get stuck or feel like the game is too easy, you can re-roll your campaign and change the difficulty. This resets your playthrough, levels up the enemies according to your level, and makes slight changes to the paths and spawns that are in the world. When it comes to combat, Remnant doesn't allow you to fire from the hip. You have to press right click to aim your gun before firing, and if you press left click without aiming first, you'll swing a melee weapon. If you have scopes on your gun, then you press the middle mouse button after aiming down your sights. When enemies attack, you press spacebar to dodge, and if you've done it right, you won't take any damage. Enemies typically come in bunches, and while you can kill them from far away, aggroing one enemy will likely attract the rest of the enemies around you. As you explore the worlds, you will encounter a mini-boss or a strong beast amongst the standard mobs. They have unique attack patterns that will require you to time your dodges or employ new strategies. Most of the combat scenarios are one versus many, especially when it comes to bosses. When these big behemoths start the fight, they have huge attacks that you have to observe carefully so that you can time your dodges right and get a chance to counterattack. Mid-fight, they will spawn minions that will also attack you, so you have to watch out for their sound and visual cues on top of the boss's patterns. The more players are in a game, the more minions that respond. Oh, and watch your aim, because friendly fire is permanently on, although thankfully it doesn't work on melee weapons. You start your game as someone washed up ashore on an abandoned and desolate area, searching for the hero that came here before you. The tutorial level teaches you what buttons to press to do which action, and leaves it to you to figure out how to use them. If you succeed in making it till the end, you'll see all of the cutscenes available in the tutorial level. If you fail, you'll jump straight to the cutscene where members of Ward 13 will save you and drag your unconscious self to safety. Ward 13 is where most friendly NPCs will be, though there will be other NPCs you can encounter as you progress through the game. You have dialogue options that allow you to approach conversations cordially or snarkily. These choices will have a slight effect on how the story goes. NPCs will make requests of you, and you will have the opportunity to accept or indeed refuse them. This is the primary way you experience the story, although it is unfortunate that your character's voice won't be heard in these conversations. You'll only hear them when they have something to say during combat, or to convey certain bits of information. There are also story bits that you can get from many letters scattered all over the world, written by Ford, the founder, this lady's grandfather. Ooh. Your character's inventory will comprise of a long gun, a handgun, a melee weapon, a helmet, armor, pants or shoes, accessory slots, and 4 quick slots for consumables. The starting inventory will largely depend on which archetype you pick at the beginning of the game. They will influence how you start the game, but you will get the chance to acquire the items from the other archetypes later in the game. As usual, some NPCs sell consumable items, and you can in turn sell them your items. Just don't buy individual items too fast because it makes the UI elements overlap over one another. There are also NPCs that allow you to buy other weapons, or indeed craft new things from boss item drops. As you progress through the game, you will gather things like luminite crystals and iron that upgrade your gear or indeed give you more dragon hearts that you use to heal yourself. Aside from upgrading gear, your character also gets powerful with traits. They function like stats in that each trait gives different benefits to your character. When you level up, you get to increase a trait's rank by 1. Your initial trait ranks depend on which archetype you select. As you progress, you will unlock yet more traits, which will typically start at rank 1, and you may then choose to level up your new traits as you gain more trait points. This is the part where you develop your own opinions. If you like what you see right now, and find yourself convinced that you're going to get something good no matter what the circumstances, then know that the game costs $40 or your regional equivalent. For Filipinos, the game costs around 800 pesos. Hooray! You there. No, not you guys who are here for my opinions in the first place. You guys are fine and I love you all. I'm referring to those of you who are expecting me to sing praises for this game. Yeah, you. You're still here, aren't you? You love the game at this point, right? Go get it and play it and enjoy it. That's totally fine by me. And we don't have to go through this hullabaloo, right? No? Well, if you must hear it, and I gotta be honest, people, I hate this game. Let's drop the charade and start with the biggest flaw in the game's design. The boss fights. I said these suckers will spawn minions, and said minions spawn away from view. Take this guy for example, Gorefist. You take a few shots at him and he does this little animation right here. When you look at that, I bet you're thinking, he's powered up, because that's typically the pose that beings with powers take when they unleash their big bang attacks or final forms. In reality, however, that's the moment where the boss monster spawns the minions and... The problem with this, you see, is that your control of the camera is tied to your aim because it's a third-person shooter. In Dark Souls 2, monsters spawning from behind you were less of a pain in the ass because you could point your camera in a different direction than where you were swinging your sword. In Remnant, the camera is always tied to your aim, and during a boss fight, you have to literally do a 360 just to check the area for more of the minions before actually shooting the boss. If the boss just happened to swing during the time you checked your 6, then you were boned. You could, in theory, use sound cues to dodge attacks from behind you without actually seeing them. But good luck hearing that one monstrous gurgle amidst all the monstrous gurgles, and the gunfire, and the music, and everything else that happens during play. There is little creativity here in how challenging the boss fights are, and it's a shame. But Speakerhead, dear Speakerhead, isn't it on you to figure out the most effective way to deal with the boss and his hordes of enemies? Isn't it on you to develop the reaction time and senses needed to overcome the challenge? Isn't it on you to get good? Why, yes, it's on me to figure out how to win. So let's start with building our character, shall we? This trait, for example, gives us better stamina regeneration, and that would be very helpful against a guy like Gorefist and his mob of exploding pimples. When do you get the trait that improves stamina regeneration?
Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
Imagine, if you will, playing Dark Souls 2 and deciding how to build your character, except the attunement stat that improves the iframes of your dodge doesn't get unlocked until the Royal Rat fight. In a game where there's a huge emphasis on dodge rolling, getting the thing that would have helped you throughout the adventure you've had so far would have been quite annoying. Because the way that the levels are structured is randomly generated, there's very little quote-unquote mastery to be had when it comes to dealing with things in between boss fights. Did you perhaps master going through the many parts of the game using the sniper rifle and decide to start a new character to play co-op with a friend? Well, those skills you learned with the sniper rifle won't necessarily be available for you because there's no guarantee you'll find a sniper rifle in the first place. You could go for the semi-automatic rifle that the sharpshooter has, and you tell me if that feels like the same thing. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Did you happen to re-roll your world in the hopes that you find the one item that you like playing through the game with? Tough luck, cause that levels up the whole campaign and makes it harder. Those enemies which you spent precious time getting accustomed to, checking how many hits they take and checking how many hits from them you can take, well, they're now more powerful. The randomness of it all undermines the very mastery that the game wants its players to have. But let it not be said that Speakerhead is too lazy to find a way to win, for indeed I found a way to slay these monstrous beasts. The winning strategy for many of the early, mid, and even some of the late game bosses is to plant this stupid weed that somehow attracts the fire of all the minions and the boss itself, so that you have a chance to safely take down the minions, or safely attack the boss, or indeed revive teammates. Name a boss, and it's very likely that this strategy will work. Undying King? Check. Clavenger? Check. Unclean One? Check. Ixilus the 15th and 16th? Check. Are they beatable? Doable? Sure. Are they fun? No. When I beat these quote-unquote scary creatures, I expected to feel elated, to feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. Instead, I feel exasperated because I feel like I wasted my time. The one word I would describe the game is lifeless, and being in a setting where humanity is on the brink of extinction is definitely not an excuse to make the appearance of your dystopia so utterly dull. Other than the world, which involved a swamp, most areas look like they could dissolve into one color, except for the bits of red you'll find lying around because horror. Ooh. I hope you like that, because this game's walking speed, and indeed the sprinting speed, is just about as fast as the world's fastest snail, making the drabness of the environment ever more emphasized. Oh, and that lifelessness extends to the NPCs as well. Their personalities can be summed up as a stick of wood.
I did what I could to patch you up. You seem like a tough one, though. Name's Wriggler. Most everyone calls me Riggs. Well, your sword was pretty banged up in the fight. Not much I could do with it, I'm afraid. The blade was shattered when we found you. Mostly scrap metal at this point. Think I remember Ace mentioned she found a few weapons out in the city. Maybe she'll help you out.
The biggest exception to this is McCabe, the admittedly pretty lady that you get weapon mods from and craft bossed weapons with. She's the one person in the game with the most personality, but unfortunately that personality just had to be a stick of wood up her ass.
Ford's gonna give my time to every stray who wanders in, and we're having words. I'm McCabe, I'm the engineer, and you're a pain in my ass. I'm not some scrap peddler, got it? I don't upgrade trash.
Nothing pleases this woman, not even the act of taking down the threats that they have spent a long time defending themselves from. When you're in my position and already find the game to be an infuriating mess, interacting with McCabe will have you spamming spacebar to skip her annoying dialogue so you can get through the crafting menu. I'm sorry, but having a desolate world doesn't mean that your NPCs must also be robotic and or annoying. But Speakerhead, oh but dear Speakerhead, Remnant is a co-op shooter. Surely jolly cooperation will help drown out the game's flaws, right? Surely the presence of a friend, new or old, will make everything alright, right? Co-op. You're quite right. Maybe if I played this game with people I trust and or love and or enjoy playing with, I might be far less annoyed with the game's flaws. Assuming of course that the person I play with doesn't suggest playing something else instead. Now that we're on the subject though, let us talk about what's wrong with co-op, starting with the difficulty scaling. Because guess what? The game is actually harder in co-op. The bosses spawn additional minions depending on how many players there are in a session. Unless the boss is just that obnoxious, and trust me, there are obnoxious bosses in the game, playing solo is going to be the easier experience. More importantly, the thing that is the least fun about the boss fights is amplified to the nth degree, and it's more likely that you or your friends will suggest not playing together if indeed you keep playing at all. The strength of the monsters will depend on the average level of the stuff you have in your inventory, equipped or otherwise. This means that if your friend has a significant level gap with you, then the one with the weaker gear is going to have a very bad time. The resources that drop in the game as you progress also depend on the average level of equipment. If you are hoping to get higher level drops while playing with a friend that brings the average level down, then you are fucked. You'd have to either wait for your friend to catch up, or both of you have to start over and reserve a character strictly for co-op. Also, only the host keeps the level progress. Yes, that's right. You'd have to alternate hosting between each other so that all of the people in the group can have their in-game progress caught up. Luckily, the process of co-oping is far easier in Remnant since you can simply create a friend-only session compared to Dark Souls' method of scribbling on the floor to hopefully have the players you want to play with see the scribble and interact with it. However, given that it is 2019, I think it's fair to expect that games do a better job of making sure that players can play together even with a level gap. I think it's fair to say that Remnant's co-op progression is just bloody off. Speaking of things that are off, NPCs can only interact with one player at a time. If you joined your friend while he's in the middle of his adventure, you'd have to wait until he touches a checkpoint before your character spawns in the world. If you press E to proceed through a bright passageway and on to the next area, you'd have to wait until your friend gets near that entrance too. If your friend decides to hog all the ammo, then you're the poor sod that has to constantly buy ammo boxes. Yes, that's right. Co-oping doesn't just defeat the point of it, it's also a pain in the patootie. Did I mention this game has cheaters too? Yeah, it does, and thank fuck this game is co-op or PvE only, because this would have been a disaster. Their cheats don't just apply to their characters, it gets applied to you too. Did they cheat so that enemies drop 9999999 scrap? Well, that's shared among the players in the session, so... The only way around it is to play solo exclusively or only with trusted peeps. And if you don't want to play with accidentally buffed characters, then you're doomed to delete it and start over, if indeed the constant crashes won't corrupt your save and force you to restart the game anyway. If you like talking to your friends while playing, then you better start a voice chat on Steam or Discord or TeamSpeak, because there's absolutely no proper way to talk to people in-game. Aside from Gunfire Games simply not programming such negligible features like fricking text chat, they added VoIP chat in the game that you couldn't turn off unless you tinkered with the game's local files, because they didn't put a button or function to disable it in the game. Having the voice chat update on your game also caused an audio bug that rendered all of the sounds mute. If you were playing with random people online, you'd have to crouch once to say yes, or twice to say no. It really bugs me that— oh yeah! The bugs. How this game managed to come out in the sorry state that it's currently in is beyond me. Many critics, pundits, and fanatics alike sang the song of how immersive the game truly is, and I gotta say, I agree with them. Having your character model clip halfway through the floor is definitely as immersive as you can get. Sometimes the game just forgets to spawn your character model. No big deal, right? Or maybe they will spawn your character but forget to replenish your ammo at the checkpoint. No big deal, right? 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 What's left? The lore? Maybe the lore's good. Let's try reading these letters and... oh. Great. The game crashed. The game can crash when you read letters. I think it was very irresponsible to release a game at the sorry state that it was in, especially considering that the game is difficult. The higher the skill ceiling of a game, the more polished the game needs to be. Every bug that wastes the player's time further taxes the patience of he who needs his attention focused on learning the game. Quality of life features are even more important in a game that demands skill, because you don't want bonkers UI elements and annoying bugs to get in the way of said skill. More importantly, I didn't pay $40 or the regional equivalent expecting a game that averages 1 crash per bloody hour, and I certainly would not have bought this game if only I had access to a demo version of the game on the same page where it was sold. I'd have tried the demo first, and if I didn't like it, I'd uninstall the demo, and you'd never have heard of me in the first place. But alas, I prefer talking about great games, and today is just not that day. Right, on a positive note, one of you beloved viewers doth maketh a request of me, and I am always happy to oblige my friends and neighbors. Next week, we're going to talk about Outward. The game isn't new, but I'm told that it has been significantly updated since its release, and I look forward to giving the game a whirl. Until then, like, subscribe, and I truly thank you for watching.